Hey, friends, welcome to Think Out Loud with me. I'm Natalie, casting this little chat from my neck of the woods, nearly 5,000 feet above sea level in northern Colorado, to you in yours at whatever elevation that may be. I host this digital adventure to turn a lifetime of internal chatter, wondering, silent suffering, and physical and mental close calls into constructive and enlightening conversations with others. This is me taking advantage of the irrevocable license to be curious, issued by the universe and held by every single one of us. That even means you. And you have a lot of choices on how to spend your time. It's your most valuable asset. And I appreciate you sharing minutes and moments with me as I gather guests around this metaphorical fire under the stars. I grew up dancing around fires, whether they were in the river rock pit my mom and dad built in the backyard or in the center of our family's camp in the mountains of southwestern Colorado. Flames always brought a special sort of peace to my mind, a calm to my nervous system. My peace of mind and calm nerves are come by in different ways today. Sometimes I have to work double time for my mental state. This past week, I found myself smack dab in the middle of a turbulent shame storm. Can you relate? A shame storm, or some people call it a shame spiral, is the internal whirlwind of feeling not good enough. It's a distinct sense that you are all wrong, and it's motivated by a fear that you might be seen for who you really are, which is a mess, not so worthy, a total screw up, simply not good enough for anyone or anything. The internal dialogue between, in this case, my inner critic and all the other saboteurs who vie for my mental attention is something that, if I don't pull it together and get it in check, can level me. Dr. Brené Brown has dedicated her life to the study of shame, and I listen to and read often her work on the topic. It's super interesting to me, as she points out how dirty a word shame is considered, when in fact, here's the rub. We all have shame. It's universal. It's in every language and in every single neck of every woods. Shame is an uncomfortable topic to talk about. It requires us to be vulnerable. And then 3, the less we talk about shame, the more likely we are to feel it, in increasing amounts even, giving it power and weakening our resilience to it. In my own journey of healing, unpacking my shame has been absolutely key. Good Lord and good night, it is not fucking easy. Heading face first into why I'm feeling like a gigantic piece of shit is not an activity I would have signed up for in the previous version of my life. Quite the opposite. If I were feeling any amount of shame, I'd grab a drink, or I'd find some other super convenient method of disassociating from anything dark bubbling inside. No amount of numbing, though, cures shame. It sits there waiting for you, feeding on itself and multiplying. Unfortunately, some folks crumble underneath the pressure of shame, and they don't give themselves the chance to prevail. Me, I'm personally committed to excavating and uncovering its roots in my life so that I can live free of it. And so, in the whirlwind of a few days ago, I had to dig deep and dig in. I recognized the trigger over which I had tripped, and I moved into action. Albeit slow and painful, I pulled it together. Recognizing the spiral of shame is a first step. Treating myself with dignity and compassion is next. As weird as it sounds, talking to myself in third person, like I would a friend or even my son or partner, is important to my own process. I don't talk to others like I talk to myself ever. I show mercy and grace. In a spiral of shame, I try really hard to do the same, and talking to myself as I would a friend in need with patience and kindness is worth the words. I also get up and get moving, get out of my head and get into my body, as they say. If given the reins, shame will sit my ass down in bed, close the curtains, and call it a day. However, putting one foot in front of the other on a walk, on a drive, in the shower, wherever I can get moving and blood pumping gets my thoughts reoriented to other topics. And I reach out. Isolation is fuel for shame. Shame thrives on secrecy. Shame cannot survive exposure to air and voice and sun and input. Not just anyone gets my call, though, because I don't trust just anyone with my heart and head. Rather, I have very select individuals with whom I connect to think out loud, process my place in my timeline, and move through the storm. Some conversations are quick, even a text exchange will do. This past week, well, it was a bit more of a lift, and I phoned a friend and a mentor. With her help and my commitment to a healthy mental state, I'm on the other side today looking back, smarter, more resilient, and having delivered to myself another dose of forgiveness and grace. The fire in my mind doused, I have gotten back to the fire in my soul. And here I am, looking to serve others, sharing space fireside with a unique and wonderful guest who who I've come to know from my travels to Mexico. I'd like you to meet Kelli Murbach. Kelli is a modern-day human, reclamation coach, word wrangler, and celebrant. She believes we shift and change our lives by rewriting our stories so that they encompass and acknowledge the whole truth of our lived experience. With intuition and care, Kelli wields the tools garnered in a multiplicity of spaces, including trauma recovery coaching, somatic coaching, social work, improv, and engineering realms to hold space while others transform into who they want to be. In just a matter of weeks, I'll be sharing space with Kelli in Shaman Heart Sacred Rebel. She and I will be featured with 24 others, including lead authors Stephanie Urbina Jones and Jeremy Pager, in an incredible collaboration of souls. Zombieville Crushed My Soul is Kelli's chapter 5. It's an emotional and moving tale of critical parts of her journey, and she closes it with her medicine of the life support paradigm, a method of examining and owning one's life that is just one of a few topics I'm keen on visiting with her about today. Kelli, thank you so much for joining me, and I'm super glad to be thinking out loud with you. Welcome to my podcast.
Good morning, Natalie. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast to get to know you in the last couple of months, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today. You actually gave me a great opening to talk about the life support paradigm, because shame can be modeled quite simply on the elemental loop. And it's a way of thinking about it that I find way more practical, because the loop is ultimately functional at the end of the day. Like, the basis for what I call the areas of a loop are about functionality. So when you think about being in shame, what has happened is that your body, you said it yourself, your body ended up disconnected from your emotions. And you want, like, the past version of you would have gone for a drink. The current version of you chooses to make that disconnection in a different way. But it's connecting. The thing is, the body connects your emotional self to the part of you that's in community with yourself and with everybody else. So if you look at the paradigm, the way it's kind of drawn up, our connection with ourselves and with everybody else is above the fold. It's where everybody can see it. And our body acts as like the vessel through everything, which everything happens. And you go from above the fold to below the fold to where our emotions are. And those are so much harder to see. So when we look at it, you ended up in this place of disconnection, and you did exactly what you were exactly what the model tells you to do. You went to the center, you went to the vessel, to the body, to the material part of who you are, and you connected there first, right? And then you said, okay, I'm feeling the shame. Let me get it in my body. Let me see what it actually feels like in here, which I'm sure wasn't great, because mine never is. Mine, it doesn't feel like a whirlwind, because I tend to be a lockdown type of person. Mm-hmm. But it ends up being, for me, it's like, oh, I am really small and you cannot see me. So, but from that place, you can acknowledge where you are, and then you did exactly what you should do. You reached out with one hand toward the connection, to the communal connection, to get a friend's help, and you let them see your emotions, so that your support loop was once again open and ready to flow. Mm-hmm. Which is what makes the idea so great for me. It's like, it's a fluid kind of thing. And it connects the parts together in a way that everything goes through the body, which is the middle material point, but it helps us to see where we can actually address those things much more clearly.
I love it. I am fascinated with the life support paradigm. How did you come to call it life support paradigm versus self-help?
So I have problems with a lot of words. I'm really picky about them. And what I found was, I love all of the ideas about taking care of yourself. And I understand that they're super important. And I tried for 15, 20 years to take care of myself, and I was terrible at it. Like, I was just bad. And part of the problem was I would think about taking care of myself and I would end up in these, I call them fights. They're probably more like discussions for most people in my head about the fact that, oh, Kelli, you're not worth actually going out and, getting your toes done. Or Kelli, it's not worth taking the time to make yourself a proper dinner because you're not going to have all of the vegetables you should have. Or Kelli, I know a clean house would make you feel so much better, but you're not going to clean it right, so why bother?
Wow.
I was spending anywhere, it's hard to put numbers on, but I would guess anywhere between 10 to 25% of my time doing self-care in these conversations with myself about actually doing the self-care. And I got really tired of it. I am ultimately I don't want to do work I don't have to do kind of person. And it just felt like work I didn't have to do. So I went looking for new language around how to think about it. And so life support is actually like the fourth or fifth thing I landed on. But when I landed on it and I was able to go, okay, so what does life support mean? It's doing the things I need to do to support the life I want to have. And it doesn't happen to me often, but it just clicked. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. That's forward looking. I'm not going to get into arguments with myself about whether or not it's selfish. Or if I do, there'll be way fewer of them, right? And it says I get to have a life I want. And so when I landed there, it felt almost like home. And that's what I look for when I look for that stuff in language. So, and it ended up being a paradigm because at the end of the day, I'm still an engineer. So this nice sentence is really great, but what the heck do you do with it? Right. So I had to come up with a model.
I love it. Two things come of that. The first part is that there's always been this concept of taking care of oneself, but until recently, and I don't mean like in the last couple years, but in the last decade or so, has bubbled up as a priority. And there's this kind of backlash against the concept of self-care that you are being selfish, that you, like you're talking about, that, you talk yourself out of these things. And so I love the concept that you are pursuing those activities and those ways of thinking that support the life that you want to lead. And you don't get into an argument about whether it's selfish or not, or an argument with anybody for that matter, because it's none of their fucking business. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the first part of it. And the second part of it, though, is I would love just to know some of the you've got very specific check-ins around the path, that you around the loop. What do those look like, that really support this paradigm? There's very specific points on the paradigm.
Yeah. So the paradigm actually comes with what I call an elemental support loop, which is just a figure 8 with five nodes on it. And each one of those nodes is what I call it an elemental node, because I couldn't come up with anything more unique. And each one of those nodes basically, for me, represent a broad functionality that I want to have in my life. So I want to be nourishing to myself in ways that are nourishing to me. They may not be nourishing to you, but they're nourishing to me. I want to have connection with the community around me. I want to have interaction with my body and my home and my car and my cats and the material things of the world. Like, I want to be an embodied person. I don't want to live in my head. I've done that a really long time. So, and that's the middle node. And I call it the anchor node because it anchors to the timeline that the loop sits on. Because where I'm in my body is the now on the timeline. So that's always moving. And then the other thing I've had to learn as an adult is how to identify and understand what my emotions are. Like, I didn't grow up in a house that did a whole lot of emotional education. So I've had to figure that out. So that's another node. And then the last bit of stuff that I'm figuring out is energy. Like there are people who see energy and can do all these amazing things with energy. And I'm like, I don't understand. It's a big concept in the circles that you and I often find ourselves in. And I end up sitting over there going, okay, I've got a pool that is how many spoons I have to be social, and a pool for how much physical activity I have at any one time. And my brain only can do so much, right? And so when I think about energy, I think about it really practical. Like I have a set of reservoirs, they're all connected, because that's what fuels all of this other stuff. And if you're going, as I did when I looked at the model, when I finally put it on paper, wait a minute, Kelli, where's your cognitive function? It's built into the loop itself, because the way we understand all of these things is through our cognitive function. Mm-hmm. So the loop itself is where the cognition comes in. And we can change what that loop looks like or how that loop reacts through training and introducing new concepts, but it doesn't get its own special node, because for me, and this may be different for other people, it's the connective tissue that I understand my life through.
Mm-hmm. And so when we're talking about applying it to the you and me, when you are a coach and you are using this paradigm to connect with others, this kind of travel around this loop and touching on these nodes it's a very easy identifiable path to really connecting with yourself and having a conversation with yourself in a very, it feels structured, which I think we need at points when we're in disarray, right?
Yeah.
You talk about in our personal histories and listening to my conversation with Kimberly last week about, look, we're going to let our parents off the hook and our grandparents off the hook. They just didn't have the tools that we have today. And so they're not to blame. You know, I too grew up in the house where we just didn't talk about hard stuff. I don't really recall what we did except not talk about it, you know, and so that's not about blame. That's just about acknowledgement. And so I'm wondering how does that history then, how does that history inform what we're doing, you know, today and finding ourselves in these healing paths? How do we reclaim that so that we like identify through our history where we need to really hunker down and make some changes? Do you find that this is a multiple part question, obviously. I'm just thinking about clients coming to you without tools and how you finally come to this path, this loop, and what you have to overcome in your history to really start on this path with these nodes and these conversations with yourself. Think more on that.
Yeah. So, I honestly don't think you have to start. I don't think you have to get in touch with your past to start on the loop, because most of us don't actually know where we are right now. I spent a lot of years not knowing where I was. Like, yeah, I was at work most days of the week and I was in the Atlanta metro area, but I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what the heck was going on with my nourishment or what my energy levels were doing, or dear God, don't ask me about what emotions were happening to me 20 years ago, because I didn't know.
Yeah.
So for me, I usually start with clients on the now. Because if you don't have a now, the rest of it doesn't matter. If you don't have a root in what's going on right now, it's really hard to make any changes. So typically, if I were to work with a client specifically using this model, I would identify a now and then try and figure out what they wanted in the future and look to see what they could shift in the now so they could get there. And then when you run into those speed bumps, because we always run into the speed bumps, that's when you slide down the timeline to the later. Because that's when you know you have to go looking for something. There's no point in going to look for something until you know why you're going to look for it. So if I'm having trouble with getting my laundry folded and put away, and I would like to be a person who folds and puts my laundry away. And I've been trying for, say, 6 months. Well, you and I have been working together for 6 months. Maybe it's time to sit down and go, okay, Kelli, what does putting your laundry away remind you of? And then you look back and you can go, oh, it was one of those things I was expected to do for everybody else in my house. So of course, I don't want to put my own laundry away now, because shouldn't somebody be taking care of me? Or of course, I don't want to put my laundry away now. I already put that laundry away 10, 20 years ago when it was my mom's underwear and my dad's jeans. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but the reason the elemental loop is on a timeline is because we have to start in the now and work forward and back. It's there so we can kind of oscillate back and forth in our conversations, so that we don't just keep beating our head against a wall. Because a lot of times just the acknowledgement of, oh, I don't like doing this. The laundry thing is real. I don't like folding my laundry because it was my job and I had to do it for everybody in the family for a number of years. I gave myself grace to not fold laundry for 3 years. And you know what? I've started folding laundry more regularly now.
Interesting. Yeah.
But by just giving myself the room without going, okay, there's a reason you don't want to deal with that. And sometimes I'll revisit it and go, do I want to deal with that now? And I will, and I'll do with it. But it lets me choose whether the laundry is super important to me or not.
I love that. I don't know of, it's hard to sit still long enough to even get to a point where, just using the laundry as an example, where most people don't have patience to sit and think about why is this such, a problem for me, or what's the root cause in all of this? Life is moving too fast for us to invest that kind of headspace into something which feels like, and where I'm going with this is there becomes attached to the places where we feel like we should take some time to investigate. There becomes attached to it some shame that starts to spin around it. Like, if I could just stop long enough to figure something out. Where I'm going with this then is there's a very distinct difference between what you do as a reclamation coach and what somebody might find in, let's say, traditional therapy, and like around activities and behaviors being diagnosed versus activities and behaviors being the fuel for thought when it's time to go there to investigate. So I'm curious on just what the differences are between what you do with clients that they might find unique to, I know all of it is unique, but completely different from what they might find through a therapist that they've found through insurance or something that they have to go to.
That's actually a really common question. I'm really glad you asked. I like to start with the idea that my relationship with my clients is one of a peer. I am coming to them with knowledge because I'm a certified trauma recovery coach, so I have a lot of knowledge behind me, but I'm not sitting with them as someone who's about to tell them what to do. I'm not diagnosing them. I'm not, in general, trying to figure out what's wrong. Part of me says I don't care, and that's not true. I care what's wrong, but I don't care what label we put on it. And I care what they want to have be different, like how they want their functionality around us to be different. And as a peer, dude, a lot of times I'm just there to cheer you on or be your second set of eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of look at coaching as, when I was an engineer, I designed wood framed buildings for a living. And every once in a while, I had to go out on construction sites and review wood framing. And I worked with this, I did it long enough. There were guys around town I worked with all the time. And I'd show up they'd see me like every June, July, and August, because we'd walk framing. And it never failed. One of them would go, I can't believe I missed it. I'm like, look, you've been walking around these sticks for 6 weeks, depending on how big the project is. You've been looking at them every day. It's no wonder you miss the fact that there's the block missing there, because you are just so focused on all of the other things, you don't see the missing block. That's why I come out. That's why you get a coach. You get a coach who can see the missing blocks or the missing pieces, or who can ask hard questions. Not to be mean, not to push you down, but to say, hey, have you considered this? And there is no therapeutic plan for that. It's showing up and meeting who you are that day.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some clients I work with, and we have plans, and we work the plans because that's who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got other clients who working the plan for them just creates way more stress. So we don't work a plan. We work what that comes into the room that day.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm not reporting to insurance companies, because I'm not trying to keep a license, I can totally work that way. It's the benefits of going to see a coach.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Yeah. How did you come to know yourself? Like, you talk about your previous life as an engineer, and then the shift into, like, how did you know you wanted to help others in their journeys? And then I want to know about the concept of secular shepherdess. I want to know the background on that. So how did you come to know yourself as a healer and a coach? Mm-hmm. And then give us the history of secular shepherdess.
Oh, wow. Like all of my stories, this one is like covers a long time frame. I was an engineer for 22 years, and I knew about 5 years in, I didn't want to be an engineer for the rest of my life. So when the time came and I had the ability to do so, I retired from engineering, and I went back to school and got a master's degree in social work.
Awesome.
And while I was getting that degree, I'm like, there is still something missing in my life. And I ended up in healing spaces, in more, we'll call it non-medical healing spaces, where spirituality and connection with the elements happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of found myself at home because it was a way to connect with the universe that wasn't as dogmatic, and I could make it what I needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I finished my master's degree in social work and promptly ended up not getting out of bed most days of the week, depressed. Because my body said, you're not doing the corporate work. You're not doing agency work. You're not putting yourself in a position to work 80 hours a week and get no respect and no pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me about 6 months to go, okay, crap.
Mm-hmm.
I have to do something else. And luckily by then, I had been through the wheel once. I'd been through the wheel with Jeremy and Stephanie once. So I went looking for coaching training, and I got lucky enough to find a program I really appreciated. So that's how I ended up here.
Mm.
As for secular shepherdess, part of that is that the iconography of the shepherd is really loud in Christian circles, right? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. It's written in the Psalms as English-speaking people understand them. So I was looking for a word that wasn't super directive. So I landed on shepherd because I was looking for a word that wasn't super directive. So how do you tell people you're holding space for them without necessarily driving their train?
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what a shepherd does. He takes sheep to a specific location, keeps them corralled, and keeps an eye out for danger.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing the Christian connotations and knowing that I didn't want to have I didn't want people to think I was a Christian shepherdess. I tacked the secular on the front because I'm just trying to guide your life. Trying to create a space for you to choose what your life is. Yeah. Guide is the wrong word. I'm just trying to create space so that you can feel safe enough to pause and look. And pause and go, oh, maybe I don't want to keep doing that.
Yeah. And what's rising up for me is that, like a shepherd, you've got my back while I examine it.
Yeah.
Which I feel very strongly from you. I really appreciate that. The space is held, it's safe, and I'll keep an eye out for if there's anything you need to worry about. But if you don't hear, let's go in, let's get this tackled.
Yeah, it's as safe as I can make it.
Yeah.
I always like to put it that way because we talk about safe spaces as if they're absolutes, and they're not. They're as safe as we can make them, because we may end up hitting something that neither one of us expected.
Yeah.
But I also guarantee I'm not leaving you there. I stand with you while we walk through those spaces so that we get to the other side. Maybe a little rattled and maybe a little wobbly, but we make it through to the other side and we make sure that we're okay.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Circling back, you've worked really hard to create definitions, secular shepherdess being very specific and thought out. And I love that about you. And you manage expectations around language. I go back to my first time spent with you in circle and ceremony and noticing an attention that you pay to language. It's very on your site, in your work, in your written word. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so I've actually recently come to understand this, and I think it's two big factors. Number one, my father was in the military, and when he was in the military, he became really good at malicious compliance.
Wow.
Like taking the letter of what people tell you and just doing that. Because in the military, that's what he was taught to do. And he found himself in what I'm going to guess. He died when I was 18, so we've never actually had these conversations. I'm going to guess is a relationship in which he felt like he didn't have a whole lot of power. So he often talked about maliciously complying to the things that were asked of him within that relationship. So I grew up in a family where paying attention to language was really important. Because in addition to using it to follow the letter of the law, you'd get responses like, if I tell you to be home when the streetlights come on, it means you're home within 3 minutes of the streetlights coming on.
Mm-hmm.
So there were expectations around what language is and that you were paying attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is, I read a series of books about Amelia Bedelia when I was a kid.
I remember Amelia.
Yeah, and she was this wonderful white woman who was a maid, who dressed in this French maid's costume and looked a little funny. But Amelia's main trait was she took everything literally. And there's one set of images that haunts me to this day. She was told to run over the tablecloth with an iron. So she lays the iron out on the ground. Sorry, she lays the tablecloth out on the ground, grabs an iron, and proceeds to run back and forth across the tablecloth, leaving footprints all over. Now, before I ever turned that page, I was afraid as fuck for Amelia. She had just ruined the tablecloth. And I was afraid she was going to be laughed at. I didn't know what was going to happen to her. And I still don't. I have the books in my second bedroom and I still haven't opened them up to figure out what happens at the end of this little scene. But to this day, I can still feel the fear that came up when I saw her footprints on the tablecloth. Because it was the day I figured out the words other people are saying are way more important than what I think they mean for my own safety. So I'm really particular about words and trying to understand what people mean when they say them. And I'm really clear about my own because it is how I create safety in a space. I ask you what you mean by something so that I know what you mean by that. So I know what you're expecting from me. I am really clear, or I'm as clear as I can be about the things I say to you so that you know what I'm expecting from you. It is the way I create safety around me all the time. So that's why I'm a anal retentive asshat about language.
If we took the extra time to clarify and to ask, one or two extra sentences, one or two extra questions, can I just be sure of what you meant by saying fill in the blank? And we didn't make assumptions, and we didn't, it would make the world a better place. And far more responsible communication would be occurring if we just took, and it's just a sentence more. It's just a clarifying question, right? To make sure we're on the same page. I can do more of it. That's for damn sure.
I can do more of it. Some days I'm really great at it, and some days I'm not. Like, you get me all up and excited about something.
Yeah.
I am a little maliciously compliant, believe it or not. Right?
Yeah.
So I think the other thing is we have to actually be listening.
Yeah. Listen for the first round. And if what we hear is not clear, then the follow-up. But you're damn right. It takes listening. Yep. Active listening.
It also takes identifying words that you internally identify differently than other people do. I have a number of words that I don't identify the same way other folks do.
Yeah.
Right. So there are times when I have to have conversations. Inner critic is the most recent one that got itself added to the list because I don't define inner critic the same way psychologists or people who talk about inner critics identify inner critics. Partially because I grew up in a time of Siskel and Ebert and they actually like some of the movies, right? So I had to, like, if I'm doing parts work, I have to let whoever I'm doing parts with know that I call that part of my personality my inner asshat, or Mia, if you don't want to swear at me every time.
I like that. Yeah, critic being something that there's taste and distaste and we're looking for, there's a discernment that's going on. Yeah. Interesting. Kelli, my beautiful friend, I want to thank you for your time and insight. I always enjoy being around you and the space that I share with you. Very specifically, I'm using my words that I do. I enjoy our space together. And you're a special human, and I am proud to know you.
Thank you.
I want to be sure that people can find you and experience you in real time. Can you share details of your website, any social handles, how folks can be in touch with you to explore reclamation coaching. I mentioned you're a celebrant, any other co-journeying opportunities that you might put together as like special events. How do people be in touch?
So the easiest way to find me is my website, which is secularshepherdess.life.
Beautiful.
I'm also on Instagram and Facebook at Secular Shepherdess. The life support paradigm itself has its very own Instagram handle at Life Support Paradigm. And if you're one of those rare folks over on Mastodon, I'm on mastodon.social at Shepherdess.
Okay.
So as for other things coming out, I'm putting together a program that's not quite available yet and isn't up for pre-sale, where we spend a couple of weeks going through the parts of the life support paradigm so that we can kind of dig in and people can really think about it and ask questions. I just don't know what the format of that quite looks like yet.
So more of a group, a class around the life support paradigm.
Right.
Interesting. Right. I would love to know more about that. And then we've got books coming out that I think folks will be keen on reading and taking advantage of the healing information that's inside. I know I am. That's awesome. Well, thank you. I'm going to take us out from here. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and for thinking out loud with me and today's guest, Kelli Murbach, Secular Shepherdess, and my soul sister. There's more in store as my life unfolds in its surprising and special ways. I'm going to continue to welcome more friends from my trips to Mexico in the coming weeks, and I'm also going to be circling up with past guests to check in on topics and projects that listeners have found especially interesting. I hope everyone will continue to tune in, keep an eye out for when, and until then, take care of yourself. Big hugs, big love. Bye, friends.
Hasta luego, y'all.